There's a road in the American Southwest that people used to plan their trips around. Not to see it, to avoid it. 194 miles. Cuts through New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah. Empty desert on both sides, the kind where you can drive an hour and not pass a single gas station. And for most of the 20th century, it had a number on it that nobody could ignore. 666. That wasn't a nickname. That was the actual federal highway designation, stamped on actual metal signs, bolted to actual posts for 77 years. U.S. Route 666. And whether you believe numbers can be cursed or not, this particular stretch of blacktop built up a body count and a reputation that outlasted the number itself. People who broke down out there in the physically hostile desert sometimes didn't make it, and that's before you factor in anything supernatural at all. But none of that stopped Daniel. Daniel made his first mistake the moment he crouched down and picked the atlas up off the floor. He held it for a few seconds before it hit him what was actually wrong. It wasn't the water damage or the smell of mildew coming off the cover. It was that the atlas was already open, already lying face up to that exact page in the middle of a gas station nobody had used in 30 years, like somebody had left it there open on purpose. For him. He looked around the empty station. There was nobody there who could have done that. He should have left it right there on the floor, should have backed out of that doorway and gone straight to his SUV, back onto the highway, toward Cortez, toward anywhere that wasn't this dead building, sitting alone in 200 miles of desert. But he didn't. This was his third and final mistake. He'd tell himself later it was curiosity, that a water-damaged road atlas was exactly the kind of prop his book needed. But he'd come to understand that wasn't quite what it was. And the second mistake? I'll get to that in a moment. It was October of 2011. Northwestern New Mexico. The kind of cold that drops in fast the second the sun's gone. Daniel had spent the last 3 days working a photo book on abandoned places. Dead motels, stripped gas pumps. The kind of roadside America nobody stops for unless they're specifically looking for it. He'd started in northern Arizona, worked his way through western New Mexico, and by the afternoon of October 18th, he was finishing up near Shiprock, photographing the volcanic rock the Navajo call Tsebitai, the rock with wings. By the time he packed up his gear that afternoon, the light was gone and the temperature had already dropped the way it does out there, fast and all at once. He had more than enough photographs for the day. A motel would have been the easy call. Instead, he stood next to the SUV, checked the mileage to Cortez, and figured he could make the drive in one straight shot before midnight. That was his second mistake. He'd spend a long time thinking about it later, how small and ordinary it felt in the moment, just a practical decision about time and distance, and understanding that this is exactly how these things work. The road doesn't announce itself, it just waits. But before I tell you what happened to Daniel, you need to understand what this road actually is. The highway got its number in 1926, purely by accident of bureaucracy. It was the sixth spur branching off the newly created Route 66, so it got labeled 666. That 60-mile stretch through New Mexico had something like 400 sharp curves packed into it. People died on that road. A lot of people. Whole families left Gallup heading north and never made it to where they were going. By the 1970s and 80s, truckers running this corridor at night started bringing back stories that dispatchers, well, they just didn't know what to do with. A semi coming straight down the center line, no warning, moving too fast to be real, lit up like it was on fire. Drivers swerved to avoid it. Some crashed, avoiding something that, when investigators went looking afterward, left no tire marks, no debris, no record of ever existing. People still talk about Satan's sedan showing up on empty stretches at night, about hitchhikers who get in the car and don't get out, about something loping alongside vehicles in the dark, keeping pace no matter the speed. There's a version of the hitchhiker story that gets repeated more than any other. A driver alone at night picks up someone standing on the shoulder, no car in sight anywhere, nowhere they could have walked from, makes small talk for a mile or two, then goes quiet in the mirror. And when the driver finally glances back to check on them, the seat is empty. Not a door swinging open, not someone jumping from a moving car, just gone, mid-conversation, like the seat had never been occupied at all. In 2003, the state renamed the road. U.S. Route 666 became U.S. Route 491. There was a Navajo blessing ceremony when the old signs finally came down for good. The renaming was supposed to end it. It didn't, not clean. People kept reporting ghost trucks and shapes on the roadside for years afterward, same as before, just under a different name now. And that's the road Daniel turned onto that night in October 2011, not thinking about any of this. The desert changes after dark out there. It's not the kind of dark you get near a town, where there's always a light somewhere over the next rise. This is older than that, emptier. Daniel hadn't passed another car since Gallup. The radio wasn't finding anything worth keeping. Static. A burst of something in Spanish, static again. So he shut it off. And the quiet that filled the cab wasn't the comfortable kind. It had weight to it. He caught himself listening to the engine, the tires on asphalt, the wind against the windshield, just to have something in his ears besides silence. Around 9:15 p.m., his GPS lost signal. He wasn't worried. He had a paper map. The road only went one way. But then the screen did something odd. It went black, rebooted, and threw up two words, recalculating route. Then black again. Then the same two words. Over and over. 7 times in half an hour. And never once did it actually load a route. Just those words, then dark. Then the words again, like something reaching for a signal it couldn't quite grab. He turned the screen face down. At 9:52, headlights showed up in his mirror, and for a second he was relieved. After 90 minutes of nothing out there, another car felt like proof the rest of the world still existed somewhere behind him. It was a pickup, old, dark-colored, sitting about 300 yards back, and staying exactly there no matter what he did. He sped up. It sped up. He eased off. It eased off, not roughly matching him exactly, with a precision that doesn't line up with how a person actually drives a truck on an empty highway at 10 at night. This went on for 40 minutes. He pulled off at a boarded-up gas station to let it pass. It didn't pass. He sat there with the engine off for 3 full minutes, and the highway behind him stayed completely empty. No taillights fading out. No sound of an engine anywhere. It was like the truck had simply stopped existing the moment he stopped watching it. So he got out, just to move, just to do something other than sit there thinking about it. He walked the dead station for a while, camera in hand out of habit, rusted shelving, broken glass, graffiti across the back wall, a door frame with no door left in it, leading into what used to be an office. On the floor near the baseboard, he found a road atlas. It was swollen from years of moisture, most of its pages fused shut from the damp and the desert heat. Only one page had survived. Northwestern New Mexico, a thick red line cutting north, labeled clearly in old faded print U.S. Route 666. And, this is where we get back to that first mistake. He picked it up. That's when he clocked it. The same thing that had bothered him without him quite placing it. The atlas hadn't been closed or face down or fallen open to some random spot the way a dropped book usually lands. It was open to that exact page, sitting there in the middle of an empty room like it had been set out for someone to find. He noticed the quiet around him had changed too, gotten closer, heavier, pressing on his ears in a way that made him suddenly sharply aware of how dark it was outside those boarded windows and how far he was from anything that could help him if he needed it. He should have set the atlas down and walked straight back to the car. Instead, he stood there a moment longer, long enough that some part of him already understood something the rest of him hadn't caught up to yet. Then he put it down and walked back to his SUV. It was 11 p.m. 23 minutes later, a man was standing on the shoulder of the road. He appeared the way things appear at the edge of your headlights. Not gradually, just suddenly there. Elderly, Native American, denim jacket, wide-brimmed hat, hands at his sides. Not waving, not flagging Daniel down, just facing the road, looking straight at the vehicle with an expression Daniel couldn't place. Not distress, not confusion, nothing that matched an old man standing alone on a desert highway at 11 at night. Daniel slowed, but didn't stop. He checked the mirror as he passed. The man hadn't turned to watch the car go, still facing forward, toward where the SUV used to be. Daniel drove 15 miles. He came around a long curve and the man was standing on the shoulder again. Same jacket, same hat, same posture. Daniel hit the brakes hard enough to fishtail on the asphalt. There was no road connecting the two spots, no side street, no building, no parked car anywhere in the dark that could explain how a man on foot got 15 miles up the highway ahead of him. He never got an explanation for that. He still doesn't have one. He drove on. 11 minutes later, the truck was back. Closer this time, 50 yards instead of 300. Close enough now that in his mirror, Daniel could make out the shape of the cab, the outline of the windshield, and where a driver should have been sitting, something his eyes kept sliding off of. Not an empty seat, not clearly anything, just wrong, in a way that refused to resolve no matter how hard he looked at it. Then he noticed the headlights on the truck behind him. They were on. He could see them clearly, but there was no light hitting the road between the truck and his bumper, no cone spreading forward the way headlights are supposed to work. The lights existed. What they were supposed to be doing didn't. He hit the gas. The truck matched him instantly. 80, then 90, still exactly 50 yards back, like it was tethered to his bumper by something that didn't care about mass or momentum, or how fast an engine can physically accelerate. He tried braking hard just to test it. The truck didn't close the gap and didn't fall behind either. It just slowed with him, like 50 yards wasn't a distance the two vehicles were driving, so much as a fixed measurement that applied no matter what either one of them did. Then his GPS turned itself on. Screen lit up without him touching it, loaded a route, and a calm, automated voice, the same voice that had spent the last hour failing to find a signal, said, "Continue on US Route 666 for 37 miles. A road that hadn't carried that name in 8 years. A designation that didn't exist in any mapping software on Earth anymore." He looked up. There was a sign in his headlights. Standard highway marker, white letters on dark background, exactly like 1,000 signs you drive past without ever really seeing. This one read US 666. He doesn't remember much of the sound he made. He remembers swerving, catching the wheel, and not lifting his foot off the gas for the next 45 minutes. When he finally checked the mirror, the road behind him was empty. The truck was gone. just dark highway and white lines ticking backward into nothing. About 20 minutes after he left that gas station, Daniel came around a bend and caught hazard lights flashing on the shoulder. A pickup truck, nose crumpled into the guardrail hard enough to fold the hood, but the cab still upright. 3 teenage boys sitting by the road. One had a cut over his eyebrow, blood tracking down the side of his face. Another was holding his arm against his chest like it hurt to move it. The oldest of the 3 was standing next to the wreck, just watching the empty highway. Daniel pulled over to check on them. They told him they were fine, or close enough to it. No cell signal anywhere out on that stretch. He already knew that much himself. The oldest one asked if, once Daniel reached Cortez, he'd call his father and let him know they were okay and waiting on help. Daniel said sure. The kid gave his name, Tyler Bennett. Daniel tore a receipt out of his wallet, wrote down the boy's father's name and his phone number. Before leaving, Daniel raised his camera almost out of habit. He photographed the wreck, then took one wider frame with the 3 boys beside the pickup. The truck, the 3 of them next to it. He'd shot scenes like this before, roadside stuff, and nothing about it struck him as unusual in the moment. He wished them luck, climbed back into the SUV, and kept driving north. He reached Cortez a little before 1 in the morning. He checked into a motel, and it wasn't until he was unpacking his gear that he remembered the receipt still folded in his wallet. He found a payphone near the office, dialed the number, and told the man who picked up that he'd come across 3 teenagers in a crash a few miles south of town. Apologized for the hour, told him the truck was pretty banged up, but the boys seemed all right, and they were waiting for help to arrive. There was a long silence on the other end. The man asked him to repeat the name. Daniel said it again. Tyler Bennett. The man was silent for several seconds before asking Daniel to repeat the location of the crash. When Daniel finished, the man quietly explained that his son Tyler had died on that stretch of U.S. Route 666 in October 1998. The pickup had left the road. None of the boys survived. He'd died on U.S. Route 666 back in October of 1998. Same stretch of highway Daniel had just described. The truck had left the road there, and all 3 boys were gone before anyone reached them. Daniel stood there for a long time with the receiver still in his hand. His first instinct was that the old man had mistaken him for someone else, another Tyler Bennett, another crash. It was the only explanation that made any sense. Daniel developed his photographs the next morning. Most of them were exactly what he remembered shooting. Shiprock in the afternoon light, the dead buildings from earlier that day. Then he got to the one of the wrecked pickup. The 3 boys were seen right where he'd left them. There was nothing unusual about the photograph. No blur, no distortion. Just 3 ordinary teenagers seen beside a wrecked pickup on an empty stretch of highway. He just knew, looking at it, that every one of them had been dead for 13 years before he ever pulled over to help. Daniel has never driven Route 491 again. He still has that photograph. It sits in a folder with the rest of his work from October 2011, mixed in with the shots of Shiprock and the dead motels from that same trip. Anyone flipping through it would just see 3 teenagers standing beside a wrecked pickup on an empty stretch of road. Daniel has never shown anyone the photograph. He isn't afraid they won't believe him. He's afraid they will. Somewhere on that stretch of road, 3 teenage boys are still waiting for someone to stop and tell their father they're all right.